Greetings, this is Dr. Joe Green, head pastor of St. Paul's Missionary Baptist Church located in Harrisburg, Pennsylvania. Also the founder of the 2019 movement, and I want to share a couple of thoughts with you. When we look at things that are happening in the world, it's important for us to look at it in a bigger picture, a bigger lens. And I'm not here to go into any graphic details about the coronavirus or any other thing that's happening, whether it's a real virus or not. That's not the point in this talk. But what I will say is that even if it's something that occurs, you have a group of people, or you have people that will look to take advantage of it. Rahm Emanuel, who was a former advisor for President Obama, made a statement saying that, in essence, that never let a good crisis go to waste. Now, he quoted it from. It was reported that other people have stated that, especially those who are globalists or who are internationalists. So they were originally called internationalists. David Rockefeller describes himself as an internationalist, but now more people are more specifically calling them globalists. Globalists are the ruling elite, the New World Order people. It goes back a long way. So in order for you to be able to really understand and to kind of sift through the things that are occurring, you have to look at it from a big lens, a big picture lens. You can't look at it in from a narrow perspective or a snapshot. You have to look at the overall perspective. And when you do that, you will see how people will take advantage of these situations or these crises. If you've been following the 2019 movement and some of the things that I've been talking about, and I would just ask you to subscribe to the channel, hit the notification button so that every time we post a new video, you'll get a notification of it. So when you hear the overall picture, and I don't want to go into too much detail, but these people with the mindset of globalists or the New World Order people, you have the ruling elite that's at the top, but then you have organizations that support their agenda, and they support their agenda with the reward of wealth and fame and fortune and power. So aside from those people known as the ruling elite or the Illuminati, you have the Council of Foreign Relations, the Trilateral Commission, the Bilderberg Group, the Club of Rome. You have many other organizations that are supportive organizations underneath of that they support the agenda. And like I said, what they do is they get fame and fortune and power in return. You have people in the music industry, you have people in professional sports, you have people in politics that, although they may not be a part of the overall conspiracy of these ruling elite people, but they get rewarded by helping to promote the agenda. A lot of these musicians that are making music and videos and movie people, actors, they're making things to push that agenda of the globalists, the ruling elite. And again, they get fame and fortune in return. That's why you can see two musicians, right? Two singers, and one will become wildly popular and famous, and the other one won't, even though that other one may be just as talented or even more talented than the one that makes it big. So that's why you have to look at it from a big picture, and also understand that this agenda is very ancient. It's an old agenda. It's an old philosophy that goes all the way back to, for you biblical scholars, all the way back to Genesis 3. But more specifically, when you look at what we're dealing with now, and it originated more recently from Europe and the European mindset. During the time of the Enlightenment age and different time periods in Europe, people were coming together and they were strategizing on how to have a one world system, New World Order. One world governmental system. The Bible talks about it. The Bible describes it as Mystery Babylon, the mother of all harlots and the abominations of the earth. And so you have that system that's in play. Again, that's why it's important to understand that the philosophy, the ideology goes back a long way. And they will tell you, if they are being honest, those who consider themselves to be enlightened or illuminated. So you understand, to be illuminated means to be enlightened. And so the name for Lucifer in Hebrew is the light bearer or the light bringer. And so these people that adhere to this ideology, they believe They're Luciferians. They believe in Lucifer, who was giving secret knowledge to humanity, and that secret knowledge makes them gods and makes them qualified to run all of humanity and run the earth. That is what they believe. That's the core of their belief system and their philosophy. They believe that, like for instance, Charles Darwin, who was one of them. He's the one who wrote the book, The Origin of the Species Through Natural Selection. He helped to promote the idea of evolution, and they believe that humankind would evolve eventually through the philosophy. You have Malthus, which is where you get the Malthusian ideology from. And so survival of the fittest basically means that the stronger parts of the species, talking about human beings, will survive, and the weaker strands of the species will eventually die out. That's what they believe. But they believe that it happens, that nature, Mother Nature, or the natural selection takes too long, so they have to help it. They have to move it along. That's what they believe. They believe that they have to help nature along, because it will take too long for the weaker strands of humanity to weed itself out. So that's the core of globalism. They believe that the masses aren't smart enough or enlightened enough to rule themselves, so they have to rule over. But of course, the understanding is that humanity as a whole, if you just try to come in and dominate them, it's a lot of bloodshed. So that's why you had the revolutions, the Bolshevik Revolution in Russia. You had the communist takeover in China. You had other fascism in Europe during the 20th century. It was an overthrow of the power structure that was in place. It was the same philosophers, these Marxists, communists, communist manifesto mindset people that believe that they should take over from the people that were in power. And then they tried to do that in the 20th century, and there was a lot of bloodshed and a lot of horrible things that happened. So they began to develop strategies in order to get the people to give up their power and their authority without any bloodshed. Now, there's a person that you should know about named Albert Pike. Albert Pike is the author of the book Morals and Dogmas, and it's considered to be the Mason Bible, the Masonic Bible. Albert Pike was also part of the Illuminati, the European Illuminati, and he came up with a way of coordinating the Illuminati with the Masonic organizations. Now, in case you're not familiar with Albert Pike also was one of the early people in the Ku Klux Klan movement, because most people don't realize this, but the Ku Klux Klan is a Masonic organization. They use, the whole race and ethnic cleansing and all that other stuff as kind of a front, but at the core, I'm saying the top ranks of the KKK, it's a Masonic organization that is looking to help promote the New World Order. That's a whole nother talk I'll do. I'll do some other time. But when you look at the top of the pyramid, you have Lucifer, and then you have these people that are, Lucifer and the all-seeing eye, the god of this world, if you will. And then it comes down, the pyramid widens, and you have organizations that are part of that overall developing that one world governmental system. So anyway, Albert Pike is a key figure. And I'm going to bring all this around to what's going on now, so please bear with me as I kind of paint with a broad stroke and narrow it down a little bit. So now Albert Pike, as I mentioned, he wrote the book Morals and Dogma. He was also a high-ranking Illuminati. He was described as maybe a 33rd degree Freemason, also one of the generals of the Ku Klux Klan back in the 1800s. And so Albert Pike, he received a vision, and he described in a letter he wrote to Mazzini, dated August 15, 1871. This letter graphically outlined plans for 3 world wars that were seen as necessary to bring about a one world order. And you can see the accuracy. So some people believe that maybe he was, because, of course, Luciferian people are into the occult. So maybe he had an occult vision of what was going on, or it could be, and it could be both, that they helped to orchestrate these things. So he had this vision of 3 world wars that would help to create this system to make people accept the one world governmental system. Now, excuse me, Mazzini, this letter that he talked about. There's a gentleman by the name of Guy Carr, William Guy Carr, and he wrote a couple of books. He wrote, I had both of them, The God of This World and Pawns in the Game, and they're very important books. They're very good books, and I think he wrote probably back in the 1930s or somewhere along those lines. But in his book, he details this letter that Albert Pike wrote to this other European ruler or leader. The keeper of the letter, I'm sorry, the person that kept the manuscripts, they acknowledged that this letter existed, or they saw the letter, but it wasn't cataloged in the British Museum Library as it was originally thought. Now that could be some diversion. It could be, true or not true. That it could have been in there and then they removed it, because if you look at the details of the letter, as detailed by Carr, it really, we see all these things happening, right? So Carr also wrote, Carr learned about this letter from Cardinal Cairo Rodriguez of Santiago, Chile, who wrote The Mystery of Freemasonry Unveiled. To date, that people don't have the actual evidence of the letter now. Of course, this is many years later, and of course they wouldn't want something like that to get out. So anyway, in the letter, the first following are extracts, from the letter showing how 3 world wars planned for many generations. The First World War must be brought about in order to permit the Illuminati to overthrow the power of the czars in Russia and of making the country a fortress of atheistic communism. The divergences caused by the agents of the Illuminati between the British and the German empires will be used to foment this war. At the end of the war, communism will be built and used in order to destroy the other governments and in order to weaken the religions. Now, this was written in 1871. Of course, we know the First World War was in the early 1900s. So this was the letter was dated before the First World War. Students of history will recognize that the political alliances of England on one side and Germany on the other, forged between 1871 and 1898 by Otto von Bismarck, co-conspirator of Albert Pike, were instrumental in bringing about the First World War. So this letter is written in 1871, and there was, so many people don't realize that the Illuminati originated in Germany. Adam Weishaupt was the person who helped to kind of frame what the Illuminati stood for, what they were about, and what they believed in. And so they originated in Germany, and out of what is described as the 12 families of the Illuminati, 13 bloodline families of the Illuminati, the British family, known now as the Windsor family, actually are German in origin and are believed to be one of these bloodline families. So England and Germany have always had a close knit relationship. In World War I and World War II, many people were caught, even in the British government, working with the Nazis behind the scenes in order to orchestrate things. Now, of course, this makes sense when you understand that the British royal family actually was part of the they were actually German in origin and part of the Illuminati families. The Second World War must be fomented by taking advantage of the differences between the fascists and the political Zionists. This war must be brought about so that Nazism is destroyed and that the political Zionism be strong enough to institute a sovereign state of Israel in Palestine. During the Second World War, international communism must become strong enough in order to balance Christendom, which would be then restrained and held in check until the time when we would need it to be the final social cataclysm. Now, again, you understand Nazism, and you got to realize that the Nazis, it wasn't really about race. They were an occult group, and the Aryans were believed to be almost like the Nephilim. They were like half man, half gods in ancient philosophy. And so you had the Nazis and the Zionists, and I want you to understand the Zionists are Zionists are globalists. and they don't necessarily, although they pose as though they are Jews or Jewish people, Jewish, if you will, but they are not. They don't follow the Torah. They follow Kabbalah, which is is um, mystery Babylon religion that Israel learned when they were in Babylon. So they mix and match the Bible with New Age or with Gnosticism, and it's Luciferian as its basis. But these are the people that are Zionists. So when you hear about the term Zionist, you need to understand who they actually are. But anyway, um, during the Second World War, international communism must become strong enough in order to balance Christendom, which would then be restrained and held in check until the time when you would need it to be the final, needed for the final cataclysm. After the Second World War, communism was made strong enough to begin taking over weaker governments. In 1945, at the Potsdam Conference between Harry Truman, Winston Churchill, and Joseph Stalin, a large portion of Europe was simply handed over to Russia. And on the other side of the world, the aftermath of the war with Japan helped to sweep the tide of communism into China. So if this letter is accurate, which was written in 1871, and we know World War II was, I believe, from 1939 or 1940 to 1945, somewhere along those lines, it was accurate because this is what actually happened after World War II. And even if you know, I think it was Eisenhower, when the United States went into Europe and fought and overthrew the Nazis, and I'm pretty sure it was Eisenhower. Eisenhower was there, and he wanted to go into Russia and to conquer Russia while we were there, because Russia, because of the history that we had with Russia, and he was told to stand down. And then after that, Russia gets a whole bunch of a bunch of Europe, right? A large portion of Europe was handed over to Russia after World War II. And then you had, of course, in China, the communists take over China. And so you had huge strongholds in China and Russia and of communism, which communism is the governmental system that looks to create the one world order. After the Second War, communism, of course, became strong, and all the things that the letter had designated would happen, or the purpose for World War II, has come to pass. Now, many people will argue that Nazism and Zionism were not known in 1871, but they should remember that the Illuminati invented both of these movements. In addition, communism is an ideology, and as coined phrase, originates in France during the Revolution in 1785. Restif coined the phrase 4 years before the Revolution broke out, and so these terms were actually coined by the Illuminati, and they're used for a purpose. So many times these Kabbalists, these globalists, they hide behind the term of Zionists, and so when someone begins to point out these globalists, one world government Zionists, they hide behind, and they coined the term called they coined the term anti-Semitism as a way to hide behind what they're what they're actually doing. So so let me fast forward now. So, and after World War II, as they prepared for another one, they perfected means of propaganda and using the media and different things in order to get people to. So after both World Wars, you realize tens of millions of people were murdered, and that's why I always tell people we have to be very mindful of socialism and communism, because of the purpose, the foundation of why they were created wasn't to help the people. It was simply to get the people to give up their power to this ruling elite class world governmental system. That was the purpose behind it. And so after, and in the 20th century, more people died from what's known as democide. Democide is death by government. So you had the communists, you had the Russians, you had the Germans, the Italians, you had all these governmental systems that murdered millions and millions of people, hundreds of millions of people in the 20th century. So anytime you give government ultimate power, that's what happens. And the first thing they do usually is they shut down free speech. They close the churches down, or they regulate the churches, and then they take away the people's ability to arm themselves, which is why the First and Second Amendment of our Constitution was so important because the framers of the Constitution understood what happens when you give up free speech, and the media is controlled by the government. Also, so freedom of the press and freedom of speech was one and the same. I mean, or right there together. You have freedom of religion, and you have, excuse me, the Second Amendment, which is the right to bear arms. That was to keep the government from being overbearing and controlling the masses. Now, that's going to be important as we move forward. So you think about this in World War II, the Nazis and even in the United States, they perfected propaganda to use the media in order to promote their ideas and to gain public opinion, sway public opinion, so that they didn't have to go in and violently overthrow people. The people willingly gave up their rights and submitted to the agenda of the globalists, even going to war. So whenever they would go, because they always use war, and one of the ways that the international bankers got wealthy in the beginning is by funding wars. So they loan money to government for wars, and then they got to a place where they were actually loaning money on both sides of the war. So whoever wins, they still got paid. And so this is the way that they do it. So they promote the ideas of having wars, right? Unrest between nations and those type of things. And then they take advantage of the situation and capitalize on it for their own agenda. That's where you get the idea of the Hegelian dialectic that you hear me talk about. Hegel was also from Europe and Germany, I believe, and he came up with the idea of the Hegelian dialectic, which is you control both sides of the argument, and it helps to push the public into the predetermined solution that you offer, right? So what they would do is they would have things like false flags. So, for instance, many people believe that the Americans had foreknowledge of the Japanese that were going to bomb Pearl Harbor, right? And Pearl Harbor was one of the things that was instrumental in gaining public opinion to have us go into war. So everybody ended up being on board with us going to war because of what happened, because of Pearl Harbor. There's this thing during the time of Vietnam, right? So you had in Vietnam they faked the bombing of an American warship over in Asia, and it gained public opinion for people going into Vietnam. And so that's what the Hegelian dialectic is. They actually control the narrative, and they get people to buy into whatever their agenda is. So these things are important. That they have happened over and over again. They use the media as a tool to get people's sway public opinion for people to agree with those type of things. They use fear and panic and everything, right? So even during the Cold War, they had everybody thinking that we were going to go to, and afterwards, after World War II and during the time of the Cold War with Russia, they had everybody believing that Russia was going to drop nuclear bombs on us. And, back in the 50s or so and 60s, I've heard a lot of people describe how people would build bomb shelters in their house, and they would have drills to say what would happen if a nuclear bomb dropped on our country, right? That was a way of fanning the flames and stoking fear so that people believe that the big bad Russians are coming, right? Those are the things that happen. They have used traditionally over and over again in order to get people to accept their agenda. When we went to Iraq, they painted this picture of weapons of mass destruction. Now, to this date, I don't think anyone has ever found the weapons of mass destruction that they said that Saddam Hussein had, but it gave people willingly went into Iraq. They allowed the government to go into Iraq because of that, because of the fear that Saddam Hussein, this evil dictator, was going to use his biological weapons on. He had this huge weapon that he could help, destroy America. North Korea the same way, and but of course we haven't gone to war with North Korea, and since President Trump has come into office, the tension has kind of went down a lot because of that. But anyway, these are the things that they use traditionally. Now, how does that come into play now? So you think about communism. You think about how communism is part of the globalist agenda, right? China is still communist to this day. If you guys recall, late last year, the people were trying to have an uprising in China, right? They were trying to come out from under communist oppression, because the communism ultimately takes away people's individual rights. So these people were trying to overthrow the government. And then now you have this coronavirus that has given them permission to lock China down. So they locked down, they quarantine China. And in a communist country, you can't voluntarily quarantine yourself. The government comes in and does it, and they take people off and put them in places that section them off from other people. So anyway, think about what is happening now. I mean, think about the details of the coronavirus, what they're saying. First of all, they're saying it's highly contagious, which it seems that way, but it's not a very deadly disease. So I heard the gentleman from the CDC said 90+% of the people that get the virus, they recover from it. The people that have died from the coronavirus are people that already had weakened immune systems already, right? And so they probably would have died from the flu or some other type of ailment, elderly people, and people of that nature. Also, what we're not talking about is this flu season. They said 17,000 people have died just from the regular flu this flu season. So why weren't we quarantined because of that? 17,000, as opposed to right now, they said about 100 people in America, all throughout a country of 300 million people. 100 people have died from coronavirus. That's what's being reported. But yet, this is a major pandemic, and they're trying to shut everything down. Why is that? We have to realize that there's probably, whether it's a real or perceived threat is not the point of this. What it is what are they doing? How are they manipulating fear? How are they getting people to willfully give up their rights? They're quarantining themselves. They're following every edict of the government, even though the actual threat is very minor. It's very minor. This virus, they said, a lot of people would have it and don't even know it because the symptoms are so mild. And then they've acknowledged that the millennials and young people won't die from it. It's not that serious to them. So why is it that they are trying to really stoke and fan the flames of fear to get people to give up their rights and to section people off, quarantine people off? You have people, and the way you can tell it's an irrational fear. I heard the other day someone actually got stabbed. I know there was a lot of fightings, but people got stabbed over toilet paper in the grocery store. And the bad part about it is they're not saying that they won't have any more toilet paper. The stores have been running out of toilet paper on the shelves, but only until the next day when the next truck comes in. So think about how they are manipulating the public into thinking like I would fight somebody over toilet paper. Now, what does toilet paper have to do with the coronavirus? I would think, God forbid, that if I had a deadly disease that I thought would kill me, the last thing I'm going to be doing is worrying about toilet paper. I'm be trying to get myself healthy, or finding some kind of antidote for it or something like that. But this is what happens. This has been traditionally what has happened. They've done this traditionally, where they invoke fear. They use the media and other narratives in order to get the people to willingly give up their rights. Right? If you were to go publicly and say the coronavirus is a hoax, they would rake you over the coals as a they already did that with President Trump, and he didn't even say it was a hoax. He was just talking about the hype behind it was a hoax. You think about, some of the other things that are doing, and ultimately what happens is this is affecting our economy. We had one of the largest and fastest and healthiest economies in recent times, but now this is being negatively affected because of this virus. And so you have to be careful. You have to keep your eyes open and your ears open. And we who are children of God cannot operate in fear, because fear is a tool that the enemy uses in order to control and manipulate people. That's why the Bible says he has not given us the spirit of fear. And there's going to come a time, church, and I need to tell you this, and I'm not trying to stoke or fan the flames of fear. There's going to come a time that we're going to have to go against the government. We're going to have to go against the government. And for instance, in Romans chapter 13, when it talks about the government, but you have to understand, we have to obey the civil authorities, but only to the extent that it doesn't violate our obligation to God. I'm going to say that again. We are to honor and respect the civil authorities, but only when it does not contradict or counter or go against our obligation to God. And what am I talking about? For instance, the person who wrote the book of Romans, the Apostle Paul, actually ended up in a prison for violating the laws of the Roman, the Roman Empire. Daniel and the three Hebrew boys. Daniel was thrown in the lions den because the ruler of his age or his time tried to tell him how to worship, told him he couldn't worship God, he had to worship this idol, and Daniel knew that that was not acceptable, and so he refused it. Now think about that for a second. That's why the First Amendment was so important, because freedom of religion, we are able to worship God the way we want to. Communism, socialism, all those governmental systems, one of the first things they do is remove the worship of the true and living God, because they understand that they can manipulate you if they eliminate your faith and take away the Bible and take away your worship of God, then they have a way of controlling you. All these things are very much it's a pattern and it's happened over and over again. So keep your eyes and your ears open, and I'll have some more with that. But last thing I want to talk about, and this is all together, one of the other strategies is it was originally called Agenda 21, but now it's Agenda 2030. And so the plan of the globalists, they want to have it fully implemented by 2030, by the year 2030. Now, this is 2020, so we have about 10 years. And so they have stepped up their approach of trying to form this one world governmental system, or finish what they call the great work. The great work that they said that they are trying to create a one world governmental system that will give people a utopia here on the earth, because of their wisdom and their authority to govern and rule over the affairs of men. But we understand without a shadow of a doubt that the only pure and perfect governmental system is the government of the kingdom of God, because we have a perfect king and his name is King Jesus. Anyway, that's enough for now. We'll pick up the next podcast. Until next time, this is Dr. Joe Green. Keep your eyes and your ears open. Keep praying Psalms 91, and don't let fear hinder you from doing all that God has called you to do. Shalom, shalom, peace and blessings.